On here? Alright, I think I am. Hello, I am starting a live video with no real plan. I just want to kind of have more video content. And so, yeah, I had some topics earlier, but first, I'm going to explain like why I'm doing this and everything. So, I've been writing articles for many years, but it's hard to get that stuff out there. And with all my books and everything, I just think that I need more video content to complement it. But I'm really not good at production or any of that. And I just got decent internet for the first time in my life. So I'm just going to start with this. Um, the first question that I was asked, or at least the first one that I could probably address, is what has happened to the anti war movement in the past 10 or so years. Um, I think most of it is just a generational thing. So, a couple years ago, when Bush was in office, the anti war movement was really heavy. And most of those people were still, I think, the older people from the Vietnam War movements and all of that. And if you go to the recent marches in DC against the war in Venezuela, or the Women's March against the Pentagon, or anything related to the military industrial complex, all the people are like 40 and older, and there's really not any young people. So I think that people in the younger generation have kind of just accepted the fact that war is a natural state of existence that we're in. And many of us kind of who grew up before it, we've realized that it ain't right, and that, there's a whole bunch of messed up stuff going on. It's kind of like in 1984, where they kept on talking about how nobody remembered what it was like before, whatever revolution brought on that massive military police state. The people that are born after all that goes into place, it's just normal for them. And then sometimes the people who were even around back then, they just get used to it. So that's kind of what I think has happened with that, in addition to the media just pushing everyone towards other issues, you know. Um, what's up, everybody? More people are joining this than I expected. Well, so anyway, another thing is this Epstein story is huge, which I never even expected any of this to happen, because I've been writing about it for quite a while. And everybody has been calling me a conspiracy theorist forever for it, just to consider the fact that powerful people do messed up stuff. I mean, there are child molesters all over the world. It's a massive problem, child abuse. And, if you, like I posted on my page earlier, if you say that group of poor people are involved in a criminal enterprise, or they are human trafficking, or they're doing something like that, people are probably going to believe you. There's news stories about this stuff out there every day. But if you say that rich people did it, or powerful people did it, politicians did it, nobody really believes you. I don't know why those people are above crime. It's like only poor people commit crimes or something like that. But everybody is messed up, Every group of person that you can think of, there's a set in them that are doing terrible things. So it's really surprising to me that it's come out like this. And yeah, the conspiracy theorist thing is a little bit ridiculous and played out. But most of it is surrounding power, because people get charged with conspiracy all the time, especially drug dealers. That's one of the most common charges, because if they can't catch you actually with anything, conspiracy is what they always charge you with. So it's obviously a thing. And how else do you think that these people have gotten into the positions that they have and maintained them? All throughout history, it's been a brute force kind of thing. And now, only in the past 100, 200 years, has that brute force been replaced by a manipulation. But then, that once again, that force is behind it. You know, if people don't comply, then that force is always there. I'm just looking through some of the comments here. But yeah, I as far as the suicide goes, it's kind of weird because there are so many more details coming out about that stuff. The most recent thing that's really weird is that the dude signed his will 2 days before he died. And now, or I don't know who was in there or what the details of that were, but that's definitely something that I'm going to start looking into as those details come out to see what's up. There is also the theory that he escaped somewhere and faked his death. And if anybody is possible, capable of doing that, it would probably be him. So even though that sounds super crazy, it's definitely a possibility. Yeah, otherwise, I think it's been like kind of slow this week, aside from, the Hong Kong thing, which is pretty interesting. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, the Hong Kong story has been getting really interesting because the Chinese police are continuing to crack down, and the Hong Kong protesters are growing in numbers. And uh, back to the episode. Yeah, I think he may have been forced to sign his will. Who knows? But he could have also signed it to put the money places that he could get when he gets out. So, yeah, I definitely think it's possible. But, I mean, who knows? I think more will come out as we kind of, get some more information. But we may never know because, you know, what what information is going to come out that the government is, even if they're trying to expose other people, it's one of them things where they're, even if one agency is trying to find out if another agency did something wrong, if the situation is big enough, they are not going to tell the world that their organization is corrupt. um, but yeah, I think that there's such a difference between protests here and protests in other countries because people are a little bit more on the same page, and there there are reasons why we're not here, and people have reasons to be pissed off a lot of times. Like, there are serious disparities in this society that need to be corrected, and you know there are reasons why people should be in the streets and pissed off and even fighting with each other sometimes, as we've seen. As much as I hate to see that, sometimes it is necessary for people to fight back. But in these other countries like France and Hong Kong, which is more of a territory than a country, there are the issues that people surround themselves around are way less to deal with each other and more to do with what is happening to them from the government. So like here, everybody is super concerned with what their neighbor's doing. And I think that happens to an extent in other countries too, but I think we have a culture here that has been developed for that, especially in the past 50 or so years. So I don't know how we personally overcome that challenge, but I think that there is a lot to learn from them. And in America, if they were pulling tanks up like on the edge of the city like they were in China, people would have just went home. um, that's the thing that's interesting. Even though we have more of an ability to fight back here, at the first sign of danger or crackdown, we all run home. But in um, in these places, it's entirely different. Like when they put the threats out, more people join, and I I don't know if that's because Americans think they have more to lose. They really don't, but I think that they just are under that impression because of the propaganda, because they think it's number one here or whatever. When really most of most of the countries in the world struggle with these same things, with these issues with poverty and cops and everything else. So I don't know what's going to happen down there, and it's going to get pretty crazy in the next couple days, especially if China advances the way that they do. Look at these people with these microaggressions in the comment. Matt and Bob, I would expect this from y'all. Yeah, I'm not too sure about that one, Bob. There are sure mental health benefits to sex, Bob Tuscan. I can't doubt that. What is up, Marcus? Thank you for joining. It's good to see. It's good to see some of my raver homies in here too. And as all you know, I'm starting. Oh, of course, I'm still coherent. I'm always smoking weed, man. I was on that Rick Simpson cancer oil for a long time, so I have a pretty crazy tolerance. You know what I'm saying? And it also helps me with my eating situation. As you guys know, I hate food. But yeah, I have another show coming up. I'll just randomly let everybody know that in October 11th here in Baltimore, if anybody wants to come out to that, if any of you are local. I'm thinking about doing some more of that, writing that book that I recently put out has kind of re-inspired me to contribute back to that community and just get more involved. I was super jaded for a while because of the bunch of the stuff that I went through, as many of you will read in the book. A bunch of really crazy, toxic people that I ran into, which I think is common in any kind of industry, I guess you could say, where there's a spotlight. And it is even really prevalent in the activist community. I remember a couple years ago, I ran away from the music industry into the activism thing, thinking that people would be different or something, And it was nothing like that. It was just the same thing. It was the same people fighting over ego, fighting over spotlight, developing all sorts of stupid rivalries. And I thought, like, we're on a mission to do good things here. This shouldn't be like that. But nah, it was just like the music industry. And I would guess that pretty much any place of employment you go to would probably have a lot of that too. What is with that? Why do people gotta be so whack? I don't understand. I mean, it's a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's kind of important, especially when it comes to activism, because if people who believe in the same things can't even get along, then how the hell are we supposed to build bridges with people who disagree with us? You know? And that's something that I'm really trying to focus on now. And, I'm very into the anarchist community and philosophy and everything, but they all hate each other. They're all divided over disagreements on whether or not you should participate in politics, how you should, what is the correct economic system, if we finally do defeat the state, all this dumb shit. I think that, it matters, but it doesn't matter as much as, the people who are getting hurt by agents of the state and all the people in cages and just the really serious issues, the licenses and fees and everything that are preventing people like myself or you from opening our own businesses easily. Um, you know, those are the things that we should be focused on instead of who has the correct theory or who is the purist or, who is the smartest person. All this is really, really dumb shit. Um, I think the internet has kind of exacerbated this too, even though I love it and I use it, you know, the same way everybody else does. And I have probably even been affected the same ways and fall victim to some of the same bullshit that people do too every now and then. But we're like the first generation on this earth, or the first group of living people on this earth that consists of different generations that have had this kind of weird situation to deal with, where any of us can just pop on, right, like I am right now, and talk to a whole bunch of random people and put our stuff out there. So I think it has developed kind of a weird mentality in creative people, because now we don't have to just be creative. We have to like put our face out there and do all this stuff, which is something which I'm trying to do now. But I think all this has kind of added to that, those rivalries that develop and all that crazy ego nonsense. But yeah, we've been kind of, the people that I work with and the people that I've developed, friendships with in the different activism movements that I'm involved with, the people that I've kind of gravitated towards, are on the same page with not necessarily trying to promote or drive home a specific ideology, or over another one. Like, yeah, there are certain things that I agree with, for certain ideologies, but I'm also looking at the issues that I really care about and affect the people that I care about. The drug war, the wars that are killing people here and over there, and the environmental issues and I look at the environmental issues a different way than a lot of people do. I'm not overly focused on the temperature of the earth or the planet ending in 20 years, because I personally think that that is kind of negative, counterproductive rhetoric. There's very specific issues in regards to the environment that we can focus on and actually change. Like, there's these oil spills, there's endangered species, there are chemical spills. All of these random things, I think, are kind of being ignored, because everybody is just so focused on when the ice caps are going to melt or whatever. And I think, as I've kind of explained before, people like to focus on the big catastrophes and, this big Armageddon situation that may or may not happen, when there are small catastrophes happening every single day that are going to lead up to this massive Armageddon eventually. And that is why I think we need to focus on those individual things as they happen more often. I don't think that the big picture should necessarily be ignored. And I don't even know what the big picture as far as that stuff is, because there are only so many things that you can research, and I don't like to defer to experts. So what I do know is that every other week or so, I write an article about an oil spill or a species that's going extinct, or deforestation. And I think that there's pretty obvious solutions to these problems. So I'm just like reading through some comments to catch up on things here. Let's see. Yeah, there are some interesting ones in here, but nothing that I'm super, super informed on. Let's see. But yeah, as far as the environmentalism goes, I think that people are waiting on the government to put in some kind of grand scheme, and that is why the whole Green New Deal thing took on so well with millennials, because everybody's waiting for some like grand plan when really there are already a whole bunch of allowances for these corporations to do a whole bunch of stuff that you or I would be able to do. Like, they do stuff as a matter of like standard operating procedure that you or I would obviously get arrested for, because they have essentially permits to pollute, and they have um, teams of lawyers to just pay off EPA fines. And in many ways, that's why the EPA does more to actually protect the corporations that pollute than they actually do to punish them. And we saw that with the whole situation that happened maybe 2 years ago with that river near the gold mine that got totally turned yellow or whatever. I think it was Colorado River even. And the EPA was like on that for years, and they were just pretty much paying off fines and doing nothing. And so a lot of this land is given to these people too. So, and it's by the government, and a lot of times eminent domain is used to take the land away. And this is what happened with the Dakota Access pipelines, and this is what they would need to do to build Trump's wall too. These massive, and 5G also, these massive public works projects that need to cut through people's property. You need to throw people out of their houses essentially to do that. And that's something that the government allows, that is completely not a good idea for the environment. So there are already ways that like they're already getting around things. And if we just apply the same rules to them that would be applied to us, that would probably solve most of the problems that everybody is so worried about, at least over time. It wouldn't happen overnight because we've been screwing things up for so long. Let's see. List of topics if you find yourself at a loss. Big pharma. Let's see. Police order followers, voting, censorship. All right. So the voting thing, I've had a lot of people be asking me about that recently because my homeboy Derek is running for the mayor of Houston. And, we have been called a lot of things, or he has rather, and I guess me by default, because I don't know about that, Bob, and yeah, I'm not going there. But yes, so I am not a extremist when it comes to voting. I don't think that it's the best thing to do, but in this situation, I am totally in support of any kind of sex, Bob. Um, so I'm totally in support of what he's doing, and what other people have done in different areas. I'm totally in support of what Decriminalize Denver did with the Magic Mushroom Initiative, where they legalized that. I am a medical card holder in Maryland, which was a political process kind of thing, and it was a form that I had to file for, which isn't a very anarchist thing to do, to file your papers to ask the permission or ask the government permission to smoke weed, but it is what I had to do to get out of a cage in this current situation. So I think when it comes to those kind of things, it's best to not be dogmatic. I won't be voting anytime soon, and I won't be participating in that anytime soon. But I'm not one of these people that go around and tell voters that they're committing violence for entering a ballot box, which a lot of people say. And philosophically, down the line, by proxy, that is kind of correct. But I don't think it's really valid in most circumstances to throw that out there. As far as this current election in the voting, pool, of course, everybody, most of them really sucks, and I don't like politicians at all. But on the Democratic side of things, Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang are, I think, the most sensible people, despite the fact that I don't agree with them on everything, especially probably guns. But they're both super anti-war. They both want to end the drug war, and that I think is totally awesome. And just the fact that they're talking about that and putting that out there on the stage, I think is an awesome thing because people have their eyes on that. That's what people are paying attention to right now is this political circus. And even though I think it's a circus, there's still a lot of attention on it right now. And there's a lot of opportunity for these candidates to actually say real things, and rarely does it ever happen without them getting booted off the stage. So it's been very interesting to kind of see the fact that we're getting to a point where it actually is acceptable for a candidate to go up there and say and shame another candidate for being a prosecutor and for being hard on drugs, when 8 years ago or so, we would have had it, the candidates wanted to be tough on crime, quote unquote. But now they're running on a platform of legalizing drugs. Now, there's a chance that they could get into office and not do it, just like the past two have. And just like the past two have promised to end wars and not done it. But yeah, and that's the thing too with Tulsi and Yang, is they're not just talking about legalizing weed. They're talking about legalizing everything, and just the fact that that's being talked about, I think, is a positive thing. Once again, I'm not voting for them. I'm not going out and campaigning or anything. I just think that it is really important to have them topics being discussed. And I actually think they have a chance. I wouldn't have said that a few years ago, but after seeing what happened with Trump, it kind of really shook up my thinking on how this voting thing worked, because I did not see that coming at all. I really thought that Clinton was the pre-selected candidate. I also thought that they were both in the pocket of the system, so it didn't really matter. But I never saw him even being a front runner. So the fact that he kind of seemingly came from behind there, I think it might show us that there is a possibility of somebody more radical entering office at some point. I don't know about that. There are a lot of theories that people want to dumb the population down with drugs. There's kind of a puritanical, uh, from my perspective, there's kind of a puritanical element in the conspiracy movement that thinks that the media pushing sex and drugs is a bad thing to kind of make us hedonistic and bad or something like that. I personally don't agree with that, and I am all for the proliferation and normalization of sex and drugs and all type of untraditional situations. So I don't really subscribe to the Jan Irvin kind of perspective that you know psychedelics and other drugs are a tool of mental control on the population. I think that they tried to do that in the 60s and 70s, and I think that they messed with people's heads a lot, but I also think it backfired on them and the cat got out of the bag in a really big way. Um, And then they tried to put the lid on it, and they just couldn't. And then they, of course, criminalized it and made everybody think that LSD was just as bad as heroin. So I think that it's not necessarily. I don't have a one-sided perspective on the drugs or psychedelics, especially if you read my book. You could tell that I have even went through some negative stuff with that, and there were even some people who attempted CIA mind control tactics on me while I was under the influence of psychedelics, and that is, I think, chapter 25 in my book, Rites of Passage. It describes the situation that I went through, and I'm still dealing with that. So like I know that it's not a 100% safe thing all the time. They're extremely powerful tools and substances, which, like anything, can be used for positive or negative, depending on the situation and your mindset and how everything is done. But what the government was looking for in the 60s and 70s when they were doing the MK Ultra experiments was something that was very, very easy to predict and control. But anybody that's taken any psychedelics know that it is entirely predictable. You can take it with the intent of, figuring out some creative thing or just having a good time, and then 3 hours later you're reliving your childhood trauma that you never really asked for. So it's an entirely unpredictable, um, at least let me say the drugs that were developed in the 60s and 70s were entirely unpredictable. And they I'm sure they are trying to work on other things that are a little bit easier to control, but the ones that are in the counterculture movement, they're way too unpredictable to be used for those purposes. Yeah, I don't think that legalization of drugs would lead to more people doing them or more people being doped up or anything like that. I don't think that the research points to any of that. What the research does point to is that the drugs are just taken in safer environments, and that the drugs become safer, and that the organized crime that's kind of developed around the drugs goes away, and it's kind of shifted into legal businesses. And that seems to me what most fully legalization advocates are talking about now. Um, I think one of the best books out there, in my opinion, on this topic is Chasing the Scream by Johann Hari. And it kind of goes into the history of drugs in the United States and drug policy in the United States. And about 100 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, there were really no drug laws in the country. You could go down to your pharmacist and you can get heroin, you could get cocaine in Coca-Cola or in a tincture, and all sorts of stuff like that. But then, as many people know, there was the puritanical alcohol prohibition, but then there was also a series of drug laws that changed the dynamics of how that worked in our country. And instead of it being a legal business, it got pushed underground, and that is when everything got super crazy with drugs. There's like a direct correlation. That is when the addiction started getting really bad. That is when the crime started getting really bad. So yeah, you could tell that to Jan Irvin, because fuck him, Bob. I really don't like that guy, and I don't care what he thinks. I'm gonna start a pod beef now, but um, yeah. Anyway, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the name Harry J. Anslinger, and he was the guy who was kind of behind a lot of those early drug laws and changing them. But there have even been modern examples of other countries that have tried this. There's Portugal, there's even small cities like Vancouver where they've done safe injection sites and decriminalization. Denver's even started with it. I think that it's not just mushrooms, because they did the mushroom thing, and then 2 weeks after that, I think they passed something else that decriminalized all drugs in the area. Don't quote me on that because I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure I read something on that. So, you know, I don't necessarily think that drug use should be advocated, but having it illegal causes so many more problems, and especially with the crime. And in Baltimore there are over 300 murders every single year, and it's a really, really small city, and most of that is drug war crime. It's not even robberies and stuff. Like, yeah, a small amount of it is robberies, crimes of passion. Most of it is shootings over dope corners. I don't know the percentage, but a large, large portion of the murders that happen in any city right now are are territorial beefs over drug corners, over money not getting paid, over people coming up short on their, you know, uh, I forget what the word is. What is it? Ends with a C? I can't remember. But anyway, um, that's what's happening with all these murders. And as far as the overdoses are concerned, it's pretty obvious that the fentanyl situation is why everybody is overdosing. And that is a direct result of the prohibition of heroin. If heroin was legal, people would go to a safe injection site just like they do in Vancouver. They would sit next to a doctor. They would shoot up clean stuff. If they overdosed, they would be taken care of, which, if you look into the Vancouver situation, they have drastically reduced overdoses. And I think it's extremely rare to have overdoses in that city now. And just generally, they would also be there with people who are encouraging them to get help. So the person who's giving you your heroin now in the black market doesn't want you to get help because they want you to come back tomorrow. But at these safe injection sites, like they have in some of the places that I've researched, they have people who are there who actually don't want to give you heroin next week. They want to get you into treatment. So, I just think it is a better idea all around. As far as the Vancouver thing goes, there's a really interesting story around that I'm just going to kind of leave you with because I just got a message that I got to go. But there's this guy named Bud, and he's responsible for the I forget what his name is, but if you just search Bud heroin legalization homeless Vancouver, he'll come up. It was a homeless heroin addict who got all the other heroin addicts in the city organized and had them, go to the town meetings, tell everybody, like, look, we are heroin addicts, we're human, this is our situation. And he created this really crazy movement where people just empathized with the homeless people that were out there, the addicts that were out there. And he actually managed to change the laws in the city, and he's the reason why there are safe injection sites now. So I found that to be a really inspiring story because most people would have never expected that someone in his position with so many things against him could actually do that. So I thank you for joining me. Maybe I'll do this again tomorrow. Who knows? We'll see. It wasn't that bad. But thank you, everybody, even y'all who were trolling me. Love you guys. Peace out.